Hey, good day, folks. Welcome back to the Profitable Sheep and Goat Production Podcast. It's Leon here, and Matt is along with us again. And we're back to pick up our conversation with Dan Persons. Those of you, if you did not listen to our last episode, I'd encourage you to go back and listen to that one first. We're basically just breaking right into the conversation. So without any more introduction, let's just pick up where we left off.
We make our biggest jumps in our flock by the culling process, and culling is expensive. It costs money to get rid of a sheep. But we just made our mind up that, and I got this from a tour of they were at that time about 10,000 ewes in Canada, and we went and visited. And their message to us was, it's always the ewe's fault. Always, always, always. It's always the ewe's fault if something went wrong.
But what
And
if you
that
know
has
it's
stuck
not?
with me. What's that?
But what if you know it's not?
No, it's always the ewe's fault.
Yeah.
Sometimes ewes don't produce lambs that are as smart as they should be. Like, don't stick your head in that V-shaped hole. But and so the culling is hard. It's like we went through this year, and I very blindly did it. When we weaned our first batch of ewes here, coming up on 2 weeks ago, I made a list of every ewe that was in that pen that lambed, because she was in the family pen. She lambed, and now today at weaning, she has no lambs left on her. Every single one of those ewes is gone. I didn't go back at the records and look, oh, she had 3, and
Yeah, just
keep her because she had triplets, It's like, nope.
just
I
one
don't care if she
chance.
had 1 or if she had 4 or 5. She now couldn't even make it for 2 months and hang on to all her lambs. And everybody else in the pen did. And so she's gone. I blindly do it. I know I probably got rid of some of my ewes that I would have considered rock stars, but they failed me. They didn't nurse their lamb. They didn't keep 2 lambs alive. They died of pneumonia, whatever it is. They're just gone.
Jim Morgan, I don't know if you know who that is, Dan.
Yep.
Matt, I know you know who Jim Morgan is. He told me already, but the law of averages. What if I know it wasn't the ewe's fault? You can't look at it that way.
Doesn't matter.
The law of averages. If you look at the big picture.
Yeah.
It would.
I think that's where some of us NSIP guys get ourselves in trouble, because we look at that ewe that didn't raise any lambs. Well, but her EBVs are great, and always in the past she did really good, and her EBVs are still saying she's a great ewe. That's where we have to keep in mind that NSIP is only one tool that we use, and not give preference to those ewes that are great just because we like them, or just because we think they have good numbers.
Yeah, at the end of the day, they still have to pay their bills, and the only way they can pay their bill is to provide us with a live lamb at the end of the year. There's no other way to do it.
Yeah.
So, and hopefully, if she's that good of a ewe, she should have daughters in the flock that hopefully are proving themselves that they too are really good ewes. For us, it's as soon as a ewe has, if she's what I'd call an old ewe that was a good ewe for many years, and now she throws us a single, she's gone. She's told me that her body has now told me that she's done. Whether she didn't flush good or she got worms or whatever it was, but she's done. And any ewe that singles 2 years in a row, they're gone. It's just really, there's not enough margin left in it for marginal ewes anymore.
Yeah. What other culling practices have you used to move from that 170% lamb drop to 230?
So yeah, the biggest culling was just going in and pulling off ewes that were underperforming. They didn't keep lambs alive, or they didn't have more than 1 born, because they got to have them born, or that's kind of the bottom line, that they need to have them. And I go further than just born. They need to be successfully twins or triplets. So a ewe that has twins, but only one is born alive, she doesn't count. She had a single in my book. So it's got to be both parameters have to go at the same time. And then probably in the last 5 years, we've worked to more of a milk. We've used 50-day adjusted weights and tried to look at that 50-day adjusted weight and looking for ewes with more milk. So we can increase our weaning percentages. So lambing percentage, weaning percentage, and if we run a 50-day report and we've got ewes that have had twins, raised twins, but they're both little pukey 20-30 pound lambs, she's going to be gone too. She doesn't meet the milk bar.
Yeah.
So she's gone too, even though she had twins.
Now,
and then size of ewes, size does matter. And so the market we're in is a little different than yours. We're still selling market lambs at 140 pounds is kind of our sweet spot. But they got to grow fast to get there for feed efficiency. So we do look at post weaning and early post weaning weight gains and track that pretty close by sire.
What's your target for having those lambs out the door month wise? Or
yeah, I would like to have them all up at that 140 pounds by 6 to 7 months. Yep. And generally, if they aren't there by 7 months, they're probably just going to go on a truck. There's something wrong, or everybody else in the pen made it, so they end up going on the truck.
Back to that law of averages. If the rest can do it, you can too.
Yeah.
And almost always when you look at those that are falling behind, you can see that there's been a health issue back in their life somewhere. They had coccidiosis. They don't generally get worm problems because they're all in confinement, but there's coccidiosis problems, and there's pneumonia. There's a lot of little things that come into play. I'd say low-grade pneumonia is probably the biggest culprit. And some naval infections as well.
What's your mature? Sorry, what was that?
The naval infections, it might not kill them. It just makes them poor performers.
Sure. What's your average mature ewe weight?
So law of averages, we're probably somewhere in that 170 pound average, with a range of 140 to 220. So pretty wide range. We're far from a Western range. Every sheep looks like identical twins. So yeah, it's a pretty wide range, but we do have some really big ewes, and those are sort of they're here on their best behavior. If they're going to be 200 pound ewes, they better have twins and triplets. But they fit our breeding. Since we're purebred, we're pure Polypay. We can take those 150 to 200 pound ewes, and we can make that 140 pound lamb with a Polypay buck. We don't have to put in a black-faced buck to get lambs to our market size.
So you're kind of just thinking through your breeding program. You're culling hard. Basically, you're culling hard. You're not necessarily just identifying your best ewes and breeding them for replacements. Is that correct, or are you doing some of that too?
Right. So all of them technically are bred for replacements, because we sell between 200 and 300 ewe lambs a year as replacements to other people. So they're really all bred to Polypay. So I have a wide pool. But when I go to select my own ewe lambs, my criteria is they have to be successfully born twins and triplets. They got to fit into that category. And I'll take quads too. Quintuplets rarely make the rest of the cut because they just stay too small. But twins through quads, I'll put them in a group, and then I'll run that 50-day report, and I'll start selecting off my ewe lambs out of that 50-day adjusted weight report that sets them all at the same age at 50 days. And I'll pull off ewe lambs that are in about the top 60% of that list for myself. And that'll be a blind sort, not looking at them, not caring if their legs are bowed or anything else. We just pull them off the numbers, put them in a pen, and then we do our sifting and sort out the bad feet and a crooked leg and a bad disposition. Some of them get sorted out, but.
So you keep mentioning that 50-day adjusted weight. And before I knew anything about Shearwell, everything was 60-day adjusted weight. Tell us about that a little bit.
Well, I don't know where the 50 came from, because I would have chosen probably a 60-day. The 50-day comes out of a Canadian research study that says at about 50 days, the milk production on ewes is typically peaked out and past peak. And so if you go to the 50-day, you're catching those, you're really measuring milk better. The shorter the date length, the more you're measuring true milk instead of milk and creep feed and longevity. So, but that first 50 days is primarily a milk gain. So.
I've actually learned to really like those 50-day adjusted weights compared to the 60, just with our program, weaning the lambs pretty young and all that. I feel like it is a better indicator than the 60 days is. So once I adjusted to it with Shearwell, I kind of like it now.
Yeah, that was the key for all of us. We had to kind of go through the learning curve. Because it says 50-day report, but it won't let any old number in there. It won't adjust a 90-day old lamb down to 50. It'll do 35 days to 65 days is the window. So you have to have a weight in that range. And that forces some of us to change the way we managed our sheep. It forced us to run them across a scale maybe earlier than they normally would.
And that could even be before weaning, right?
It's possible you could have a 50-day wait before you wean.
Yeah, we typically do it before weaning. We like to vaccinate anyway for CD&T before weaning, so then we'll take the 50-day waits.
And we are giving and maybe that makes our 50-day waits look a little small, because we're actually weaning at that about 55 days of age, but we vaccinate 2 weeks before that. So, and those ewes are on dry down. So there's some of those lambs that haven't gained much weight in the last 2 weeks because we shut their mamas off. And so you hit the 50-day weight, and some of them are struggling to find the creep feeders yet, and their moms are shutting them off, and there's a little of that's going on, but there again, it's equal, right?
Yep.
The rest of their contemporaries did it.
Yep.
So if that 35-pounder couldn't figure it out, maybe there's a brain cell missing. I don't know.
and that's part of selecting sheep that work for your operation. You know, we can do some of both. We can change our operations so that they work better and work better for our sheep, but we can also select our sheep that they work for what we want to do. So I think it's a balance of finding both of them.
Yeah, I think you're right, Matt.
And really, I like how you focus in on your labor saving. I think that's the biggest thing we need with sheep and goats, is how to do it efficiently with larger numbers. I mean, the numbers hold out if we can, run a couple hundred ewes. Now, if you think you're going to run 100, 200 ewes and make a good part of your income off of that, it's just, that's asking a lot.
Right. Yeah, there's limits to what we can earn.
And we're on a different scale in here than you are out there, but still, it's just, we got to do it at a reasonable scale.
I think the stumbling block for some expansions is they'll look at facilities and say, well, that's all I can hold. If people come and look at my lambing barn and they saw it and I told them I used to run 1,000 ewes through that building, they'd be, no way. it doesn't look like it would work at all. But my management scheme made that very, very high tech, very expensive building, but we can run a tremendous number of sheep through it and keep it full, which makes the cost of that building per head not as significant. So, and it erased a whole ton of labor.
Any more bunny trails you want to try and hit yet, Matt?
Well, we didn't. We alluded to his Shearwell somewhat, and I know me and you, Leon, have talked about how much the Shearwell system changed what we could do, and a lot in labor saving, really. Of course, you know, both of us are raising registered breeding stock, so we have additional records we're keeping. But I don't know. I'd like to talk a little more about the Shearwell system, what it is. Me and Liam both have the handheld scanners. My question to you would be, what's the next thing we should look at as we scale our operations? What's kind of the next thing that you see as a big labor saving for sheep operations?
Yeah, so the way I've looked at the Shearwell system in the past, and so I bought my system in 2012, and I'll say I was either the first or second in the United States to bring Shearwell into the United States. So I've been with them a long time. And I did it for the RFID because I wanted to work a lot of sheep in a short period of time with as much accuracy as I could get. And so, you know, I look back at my paper records days, and we would sit down with stacks, like literally an inch thick stack of barn cards to go through with 20 lambs on a page. And we'd start entering those records into a Excel sheet, and you'd get down to the end and find out that yellow 62U lambed 4 times that winter because you read her number wrong, you wrote it down wrong, and it was a different color. Something got written down wrong and was transposed. And so it made our records unbelievable because we didn't know what was happening. We'd weigh our lambs and find out that a dozen of the lambs got weighed 2 or 3 times, and I know they didn't because they were in different barns. And then there's another dozen or so that never got weighed, but they did because they're there. It just numbers got all messed up. Weighing, when we did manual weighing and you had to visually read an ear tag and write it down, and read a weight and write it down, and then either enter it into a system or manually calculate a sheet. It was not uncommon that weighing session would take maybe an hour to an hour and a half to do 100 lambs. We can now get all of that done, and we can have tag numbers recorded, weights recorded, no errors in tag numbers, and virtually no errors in the weights. And we can run about 400 lambs an hour across the scale with one person or 2, 1 to 2 people. 2 works best. But from a labor standpoint, 400 lambs an hour for 2 people, and not break a sweat. And at the end of the day, my wife and I were still talking to each other because you weren't screaming tag numbers out and weights out and dropping pencils. And I mean, it has cut the labor back and sped things up. And so when you look at the cost of these systems, which is a couple $1,000 invested, but on the second hand, I was full-time farmer, but most sheep farmers are not full-time sheep farmers. They're part-time jobs in town or grain farms that they operate, or orchards or something else. So we all have competing things for our time and our energy. And so I've looked at this Shearwell a little different now and said, it's not just about accuracy and getting all the data out. It's also finding a way to let these sheep not compete with our other interests, whether it's off-farm work or going to the kids' volleyball games or whatever it is, if we can cut some of the labor out of the record keeping and make it more accurate, it's worth a few dollars to do that. So I'm still in the camp where I think the base system for most farms should be an EID reader and software. Now, Shearwell's got options with that. We've got a different software that's coming out that's cell phone based. I call it a mini FarmWorks at this point. It's very much reduced in what it will do, but it will keep record of who lambed and the lambs that are. It's a great inventory kind of keeper and a great weight recorder, but it doesn't have the flock management piece of it yet that FarmWorks has, our main software, yet. But I see this some gateways. I see the cell phone app as being a gateway for a small flock that just wants to start keeping records, but doesn't want a pocket notebook. They want real-time records. And then stepping up to electronic tags and readers fairly rapidly. I mean, once you get used to the technology, then you step yourself up to EID tags and a reader at reasonable cost. You're looking at $1,000 to get in the door and get, the base system in place. But yeah, that's where I see it going, Matt, is, that's the base system. Once you get into the size of myself, Matt, Leon, once you're in that couple hundred ewes to on up, then I start looking at what's my scale look like. Because I think I'm a firm believer that scales are important. You've got to be able to measure weights as they leave the farm and as they leave the ewe, so you can measure ewes' performances. So then you start looking at scales that are compatible with the rest of your system, where you eliminate having to write down a number when that sheep is weighed. You can literally take your reader and beep an electronic tag in, read that electronic tag with a reader, and the scale pushes the weight over onto either your stock recorder or your cell phone, and you don't have to type in what her tag number was, and you don't have to type in what the weight was. It comes in automatic. And I think that's the next step, is a scale that fits in with the system. The next step beyond that is to put readers on the side of your working chute, where your cell phone or your stock recorder, your data recorder, can just sit on a shelf above the working chute, and you don't have to hold it in your hands, which means that you're available to walk back and forth along the chute and keep moving sheep all by yourself, and the reader will read that your tag and the scale will do the weight, and they will both send their information to the handheld computer, and all you have to do is keep sheep moving.
Yeah.
And I see that as the next progression. When you step beyond that, then you're into more whole system kind of equipment. You're into a Shearwell drafting crate, where it automatically opens the incoming gate, and it automatically opens the exit gates, and it automatically sorts the sheep based on what the computer is telling it. So you could set it up, and I've got producers in the East doing it, where their market wants 90-pound lambs or 80 to 90-pound lambs, and they'll simply run everybody through their sorting crate. And when this crate hits a lamb that's 85 pounds, it opens the left-hand gate and shuttles it into a pen for sale that day. And all they do is, on sale day or the day before, everybody goes down the chute, and the scale starts off the 80 to 90 pounders, and the software knows that now that ewe doesn't have any lambs on her. They've been sold. They're weaned and gone. And so many of those are not weaned. Their weaning day is the day the lamb goes to market. That's when they're weaning. So it's reduced their labor down. They
Yeah.
just bring everybody in and sort.
So they're actually running the ewes and the lambs through and just sorting the lambs off as they hit the weights there.
Yep. As it hits something that's only 90 pounds or 85 pounds, it gets kicked off into a sale pen.
Oh.
And if you don't need as many as it found, you open the gate and put those lambs back with mom, and they're there for the next week.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's kind of an interesting concept, just, you know,
Yeah.
a little more
I think that's
hands-off.
the next thing on my wish list. With that drafter, so it's weighing and sorting according to weight, but you can also create groups or drafts that you want to do on the computer and download them to the handheld and draft them that way. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So when we sort our ewes into breeding pens, for instance, I'll sit at my computer and I'll decide what ewes are going to go with which rams. And I'll put those lists into the handheld device as a sorting list or drafting list. And as the ewe walks into the crate, it looks at her ear tag and it looks at my list and says, "Oh, yep, she's thus and such ewe. She needs to go to Refshaw 1186," and it kicks her out the gate into the Refshaw pen. And the next one walks in and it kicks her the next direction, or it'll tell me which ram she's been assigned to. And I can paint mark them or sort by hand or let the crate do the sorting.
Yeah.
It will
So
sort by replacement females. Make my list of ewe lambs I want to keep, and I run my finishing lambs across the crate, and I have my list of ewe lambs I want to keep, and it simply sorts them out the gate I want them out.
Yeah. Yeah.
so
We
for
yeah.
somebody that wants a less sophisticated system or isn't ready to scale up that far, I'm just going to put a plug in as to how I do it. I still make my breeding group on the computer. I do not have an auto drafter, but I still make my breeding group, and I say that ram ewes that go to ram X are going to go to the left, ewes that are going to go to ram Y will go to the right. And with just my handheld, when those ewes come down that chute, I manually put the handheld down there, beep their tag, and on the handheld, it will show me a visible arrow, right or left, and it will audibly say right or left. And
yeah, we do a lot of sorting that way, just through the handheld itself, not using the drafting crate.
I don't have the scale to warrant the auto drafter yet, but just on my smaller scale operation, that is making those breeding groups at my desk and then just go to the barn and make it happen.
We use that all the time, that drafting option, and I don't have the auto drafter either. We just do it the same way you were saying there, Leon, because with us, with our 4 different breeds, accelerated lambing, we are constantly putting groups together, sorting groups out, and the reason we're doing that is for management purposes. If I see I have these 2 groups that have the same nutritional needs, I'll put them together. It might be one might be ewes that are getting close to lambing, and another might be ewe lambs that just need a little extra feed. I'll put those together for a month or whatever, because now I have 1 flock instead of 2, and whether I'm grazing or feeding, whatever, it makes it so much easier. So we use that drafting thing a lot. Now I'm curious though, Dan, you said that you draft by hand a lot even though you have an auto drafter. Why is that? Because I'm like, auto drafter would be the thing to me, because it's one less thing I have to do.
So I don't always have my auto drafter in the same place all the time. That's one reason. But there's times when I'm sorting that I don't want it to automatically draft. I still want to be able to look at that sheep and make a last minute decision.
Yeah.
And so that just drafting manually allows me to do that.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a comment I had on weighing animals. So I do not have the scale head that transfers the weight into my handheld. I just beep the tag and I manually am entering my weight. But looking back, when I was weighing lambs, number one, it took a lot longer, and I spent 3/4 of the time spent weighing lambs was trying to read that ear tag. You know, the
Correct.
lamb wants to put its head down in there. It wants to try and turn around. Ear tags are dirty.
Right.
Most of the
Typing that
time.
2-digit number in is really not where the time is spent. The time
Right.
is spent reading tags, and that's where the data errors are made too, because you're kind of trying to read a 4-digit and sometimes a longer number. And yeah, I agree, Leon. Reading tag numbers visually is a slow process.
Yeah. I think, Dan, I remember, no, I looked at these systems for a while. You probably work with enough farmers, you don't remember when I got mine, but I dreamed of getting that thing for several years, and I belly ached about that price tag. And you know, I think I sent you a message after I had it for a while, and I said, you know, the pain of that initial cost has long been forgotten.
Long gone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, when I bought my system, I went to my trusted advisors and I told them what I was going to do. And they looked at me like I fell off a cliff. You know, they literally looked at me like, you are nuts. You cannot spend, you know, I had 1,100 ewes I had to buy tags for. Bought the stock recorder, and it was more money back then. It was more expensive then than it is now. And they just looked at me like, you can't spend that kind of money. And I would never go back. I absolutely would never go back. So,
And,
yeah,
and
times
probably,
do change.
yeah, probably most of your trusted advisors have it by now too.
Yeah, most of them do.
Convince, yeah.
Yep.
Convince
Yep.
some of them.
Yeah.
So one question I get a lot when people ask me about what EID, what record keeping system I'm using, and then I tell them Shearwell, and they say, well, what about Gallagher? What about why did you pick Shearwell over something else? And I'm an NSIP, and at that point in time anyway, when I made my purchase, I bought Shearwell because of how it could connect, not connect, how it can network or generate the NSIP report I need. Talk about that a little bit.
So, yeah, well, I'll talk about, you know, why did I choose what I chose? For one thing, when I chose mine in 2012, there weren't quite as many options as there is now. And the other downfall of, and I can let somebody prove me wrong, but the other downfall is there really wasn't another software out there that was EID based and actually had management reporting, a flock management software. And we're still one of the only companies that has what I call a true flock management software. And I differentiate that by the difference between a flock management software where you've got reports that make calculations beyond just total and average. You've got ones that allow you to sort by multiple criteria, filter by multiple criteria, save into management groups, and further break down your numbers into smaller and smaller pieces of pie. That kind of system versus, I call them the list making systems, where they're really good at making a list of tag numbers and ewes that are in a group, or ewes that you weighed, or something you did that day. But then if you want to go further and say, give me a 50-day report that's adjusted by the age of the ewe and the sex of the lambs and how many lambs did she raise, it's not there. You would have to take all the lists they generated and put them into Excel and then pull out the other pieces to get what you're after. So that's, I think, what differentiated it for me was I wanted a total package system, and I wanted one that had the other pieces that had panel readers and scales and sorting crates. Because I was at that size, I needed something. I needed labor saving devices, not just something to read a tag number. So that kind of differentiated it for me, because I had been using another true flock management software out of Ireland, but at that time they had no connection to EID. So we've come a long ways in this country in the last 10 years, and a long ways for what's available in 10 years. If I was looking today, I mean, I like my Shearwell system. I don't know that I would ever leave it, but if I was looking today, I would do a worldwide search again. If I had no inkling of what to do. I guess my advice to producers is look outside the U.S. because we are truly an island here. We're an island of stuff. There's no U.S. manufacturers doing this kind of thing. So,
can you touch a little bit on what Shearwell and FarmWorks has to offer an NSIP producer? Like, or do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, some comments on it, I guess. First off, it's not a perfect system by any stretch of the imagination, and it probably doesn't go as far as most of us in NSIP want it to go. But what it does do really, really well is that the FarmWorks software has enough features built into it to eliminate errors. Like it won't let the same ewe lamb today, and then it won't let you lamb her again next week. It won't let you do that wrong. It'll flag up and say, if you're trying to type them in manually, it would flag up and say, she already lambed last week. Are you sure this is the right ewe? It traps those errors. It traps the ability of people to assign lambs to ewes that were born over multiple different days. So there's validation things that happen within Shearwell ahead of getting it into NSIP. And that's really hard to explain to people that aren't in NSIP, but we all know in NSIP there's data validation that takes place, and you have to watch out for birth weights that are way out of the normal, or other weights Shearwell doesn't trap. You can have a 900-pound lamb if you want. We don't care. But it's those pedigree kind of things that we have a really good handle on. And so what Shearwell has done is they've developed a CSV file, an Excel file that comes out of the Shearwell data, FarmWorks data, that gives us the lamb's tag numbers, the lamb's dam and its sire, its birth weight, and all of its weight categories that it's had over its initial lifetime. So birth through post-weaning weight. And it puts those in a spreadsheet that can be imported into Pedigree Master for NSIP. And so there's no double entry of having to enter records twice. You can have all your contemporary records and not have to redo it for NSIP. I guess that's what we have to offer. And we have done some trapping in it with post-weaning weight and early post-weaning weight, but if a number is way off the charts, we're trapping those things and giving you an error message initially that says, this is out of range. So that's kind of where we're at. There is conversation taking place at the developers table about how we move forward, connecting FarmWorks or the new probably it won't be FarmWorks, it'll be the new My FarmWorks, and how we can potentially integrate that directly into Lamb Plan and bypass Pedigree Master.
Yep.
So it would be
because everybody loves Pedigree Master, right?
We do. It's really hard to get rid of a favorite child. So.
Yeah.
So that conversation is out there. Unfortunately, when you look at, fortunately or unfortunately, when you look at the total number of data points that you could collect on different sheep of different breeds in different regions, and you put all of that into a spreadsheet, I don't know, you're in column PQ or something like that at the very end. There's just a massive number of data points that are collectible.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you wrap your arms around that within a commercial software is probably the challenge that we've got as we develop something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they are looking at it pretty hard, and I've had to talk with the developer about kind of the logistics of how they maybe could get that done.
Yeah.
But it's going to take communications with the land plan folk as to how data would be submitted at that point.
Yeah.
You know, if they're willing to accept raw data, or if they only want it through Pedigree Master or Pedigree Wizard, I guess is the other one.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that would definitely be nice, but it is a big step up from where the software we were using before. We would actually enter our data twice. We'd enter it into our management software, and then we'd enter it into Pedigree Master by hand. There were ways to do that with a spreadsheet, but they were beyond my expertise.
Well, that's the problem when we, even with Shearwells, I mean, it's not hard, but if you only do it once a year, it becomes hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I have the added advantage that I help probably 30 people with it. So
Yeah.
I get to do it more than once a year, but yeah, no, those conversations are taking place. It's just a matter of time and developer time. This,
Yeah.
you know, we've been told, well, yeah, it's not a big project. You can just, you know, a few hours of programming time that can be done. Well, it's not quite that simple when you get into bigger multinational softwares is a little bit different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
Yeah. What, speaking of time, I think you have a coffee time coming
I got
up.
coffee time coming up here. Yeah.
5 minutes.
Plus, he got to go over to the neighbor yet, and where he's from, that might be 20 minutes away.
Oh, 10. 10.
Well, it was I enjoyed the conversation. Definitely. This has been interesting. Is there anything you wanted to share yet, Dan, before we close this out?
No, I just I encourage people to do your homework if you're going to go down the route of electronic ID. Find a company that's got really good support, because most of us at Farmers are not we're not computer scientists. We need support individuals. So find a company. I hope it's Shearwell, but find one you're comfortable with, and don't be afraid to change. I mean, I'm on my 4th software since I started in sheep, and I finally landed on Shearwell. So I changed and changed and changed again, and think just do your homework, and there are options out there. I hope it's Shearwell for everybody. We're kind of one of the only companies that does the tags and the equipment and the software and readers and all of it as one company.
And they have very good customer service. I can vouch for that.
Yep.
I do my best.
Dan's usually just a phone call away.
Yep. Yep.
So if people want to learn more about Shearwell or reach out to you, is there any information you want to give out today?
Shearwell.com is our website for the US. Takes you to our home US office for Shearwell North America. Shearwell is multinational, so we've got offices. Headquarters is United Kingdom, but we have offices in we have staff in Northern Ireland, all of the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, and the US. So it's a multinational company, and we sell into many more countries than that. Some of them, some Middle Eastern countries, and quite a few in Africa that we're supplying tags and readers to. So multinational, but Shearwell.com would lead you to our US website, and for ordering, and my phone number's in there, and my email address is in there. So I'm open to all of it. just be respectful of time. I'm in Central Time, so if you're in Pennsylvania, don't call me at 5:30 in the morning and expect an answer.
I would never do that.
No, but Leon would.
So what if they want to get some good Polypay sheep from you? I guess the same contact information works.
Yeah, it does work. Well, it'd probably very rapidly funnel them over to my own personal email address, but I'm not going to broadcast that one.
Sure.
But actually, my cell phone number that's on the Shearwell website is my personal cell phone number. So it's been my number for 20 years. So if they get a hold of that number, they can get a hold of me as well.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
I have shipped Polypay ewe lambs, or sold them in quite a few different states. So, but yeah, always open for a visit, and nothing else, just to talk about what's going on in your sheep world. So it's always interesting.
Nope. Yep.
Hey, very good. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to get on with us today and talk about sheep and EIDs. It's been an interesting chat.
Yes, sir. It's my pleasure. So,
Yep.
Anything you want to add yet, Matt, before we let him go for his coffee?
We better let him go. We're running out.
All right.
Good talking to you.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thanks
Have a good
again,
night,
Dan.
gentlemen. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Once again, this is the Profitable Sheep and Goat Production Podcast, where it's more than just our hobby, it's our bread and butter. Thanks for listening, folks. Come back and join us as we converse with farmers and ranchers who are leaders in the industry, interview nutritionalists and veterinarians that can answer questions and offer valuable information. Got that sheep or goat question you'd like answers to, or something you'd like to hear discussion on? Give us a call at 717-310-3641. Select the option for Sheep and Goat podcast questions and leave a detailed message. Or send me an email at leon@lostcreekwholesale.net. Thanks, and see you next time. Universal Feeders, feeding your livestock one lick at a time.